You've seen the screen. It spins toward you 20%, 25%, 30%. The cashier is watching. You're tipping at coffee shops, self-checkout kiosks, takeout windows, drive-thrus. The baseline tip has nearly doubled in dollar terms since 2019. Here's why, and who designed it that way. Long before the digital tip screen became a fixture of American life, tipping had a much older, more calculated origins and purpose. In medieval Europe, wealthy landowners handed out small sums called vales to servants as tokens of appreciation. But these gestures had less to do with generosity and more to do with reinforcing the social order. By the 1500s, English aristocrats expected guests to tip household staff, making these payments less a reward and more an obligation that marked one's place in the hierarchy. When American travelers returned from Europe in the mid-19th century, they brought the tipping custom back with them, eager to display sophistication. But the American public, still wary of anything that smacked of aristocracy, pushed back. Editorials in the 1860s called tipping an insult to democracy, a practice that forced ordinary people to subsidize the wages of workers who should have been paid by their employers. 6 states banned tipping outright in 1915, and in Georgia, tips were legally defined as commercial bribes. Yet, while public sentiment raged against the practice, a new economic reality was taking hold. After the Civil War, railroads and restaurants saw an opportunity. With millions of newly freed Black Americans searching for work, employers found they could sidestep paying a living wage by making tips the primary source of income. The Pullman Company, the largest private employer of Black men in the country, perfected this model. Pullman porters were paid as little as $27.50 a month, a wage so low it was impossible to survive on without tips from passengers. Company records from the late 19th century show that this arrangement was not a quirk of the market. It was a deliberate business strategy. When asked if $27.50 was enough to keep a man in shape to perform the duties of a porter, Pullman management replied, "We can get all the men required at those wages." The company's calculus was simple: let the customer shoulder the burden, while the employer pocketed the savings. For Black porters and other service workers, this system meant long hours, unpredictable income, and a permanent dependence on the goodwill of strangers. The tip was not a bonus, it was the wage. Pullman's model was soon copied across the hospitality industry, embedding the logic that workers' survival depended on customer largesse, not employer responsibility. What began as a European class ritual was repurposed in America as a tool of economic and racial control, shifting payroll costs away from owners and onto the public. This is the foundation on which modern tipping stands, a system engineered not for fairness or generosity, but for profit and power. In 1966, Congress amended the Fair Labor Standards Act, embedding the tip credit into federal law. Employers could now count a portion of a worker's tips toward meeting the minimum wage, shifting the responsibility for wages from business owners to customers. The tip credit began as half the prevailing minimum wage, but in 1991 the federal tip minimum was frozen at $2.13 an hour. More than 30 years later, that figure remains unchanged. The regular minimum wage has risen to $7.25, but for tipped workers in 43 states, $2.13 is still the legal base pay, provided tips make up the difference. If tips fall short, the law requires employers to cover the gap. Yet Department of Labor audits tell a different story. A nationwide investigation found that 84% of restaurants failed to ensure their tip staff received even the legal minimum. Enforcement is weak, violations are rarely punished, and the burden of proof falls on workers already living on the edge. Nearly 70% of tipped workers are women. Women of color are disproportionately represented in the lowest paid segments of the industry. For many, $2.13 is not a starting wage. It is the floor they rarely rise above. Their earnings swing with the seasons, the weather, or a customer's mood. One week, a single mother might just manage to pay rent. The next, a slow shift leaves her with less than $30 after 8 hours of work. The uncertainty is relentless, the stress constant. Maria, a single mother in Texas, describes her reality. Some nights I walk out with $80 in tips. Other nights after gas and childcare there is nothing left. The $2.13 is a joke. If tips are bad, my boss should make up the difference. But that almost never happens. If I complain, I could lose my job. Her experience is echoed by thousands. The law's promise of a wage floor is hollow, designed to keep labor costs low and profits high, while risk and instability fall on those least able to bear them. Square rolled out its first mobile card reader in 2009, promising to make credit card payments accessible for every coffee shop, food truck, and corner bakery. Toast followed in 2012, targeting restaurants with a full-service software suite. Clover, launched around 2010, quickly staked its claim in fast casual and retail. By 2025, these three names dominate the United States restaurant point-of-sale market, with Toast commanding about 16% of the $962 billion in annual payments, Clover holding 8%, and Square remaining the default for countless small businesses. Their real power, though, is not just in processing payments. It is in shaping the moment of truth, the tip screen. The math behind modern tipping starts long before a customer even touches the screen. Point-of-sale platforms let owners set default tip suggestions: 20%, 25%, even 30%, while the 15% option, once standard, has vanished from most interfaces. The no-tip button is often hidden behind extra taps or labeled as a custom entry. Behavioral economists call this anchoring. The first numbers you see become the baseline. The result is as predictable as it is profitable. When a screen flashes 20%, 25%, and 30%, most people pick the middle. The software nudges and the dollars follow. The impact is easy to overlook until you do the arithmetic. Take a burger that cost $10 in 2019. At a 20% tip, that is $2. Fast forward to 2025. Menu inflation pushes the same burger to $15. The tip at the new 20% default is now $3. If the prompt suggests 25%, the tip jumps to $3.75. The burger did not get bigger, but the tip nearly doubled. Multiply that by millions of meals a day, and the extra dollars add up fast, for workers, yes, but also for the companies running the software. Toast, Square, and Clover take a cut of every transaction, tip included. Higher tips mean higher revenue for the platform, not just the staff. With the cost of food away from home up 3.8% in the last year alone, the system is engineered so that every price hike, every default prompt, and every tap on a glowing screen quietly shifts more money from diners' pockets into the stream of processing fees and payroll subsidies. The digital tip screen is not just a convenience, it is a pressure device built to extract more, one suggested percentage at a time. Tip prompts have become routine, not just in restaurants but at bakeries, retail counters, airport kiosks, and even on Frontier Airlines flights. A flight attendant offers a $5 snack, then turns the tablet, 15%, 20%, or 25% tip. The airline's base pay stays the same, but the digital prompt turns a simple purchase into a public decision. Over the last 5 years, retail stores asking for tips have surged by 70%. Places like coffee shops and ice cream parlors, where tipping was once rare, now rely on these screens, pushing tip-dependent pay into new territory. Cash tips are vanishing. In 2019, about 30% of tips were left in cash, and by 2025 that number drops to 15%. Digital tips are tracked, processed, and often split, sometimes with businesses or payment processors taking a cut before workers see their share. For companies like Square, Toast, and Clover, every tip is a revenue stream. Their contracts guarantee a slice of every transaction, tips included. When default tip suggestions climb, so do their profits. A 25% tip on a $20 retail sale means more money flows through their systems, and more fees head upstream. UBS estimates that each percentage point increase in default tips brings processors millions more each year. Owners are also motivated to set higher tip prompts, using them to offset stagnant wages without raising prices. But cracks are showing. Pop Menu reports 44% of consumers tip in places they do not think deserve it, just because the screen asks. 62% say they would rather pay higher prices and skip tipping. Guilt tipping costs the average American $283 a year, down from $450 last year. The backlash is building as people see the system as engineered for profit, not fairness. Chicago moved first. In July 2024, the city began phasing out the tip credit, mandating full minimum wage by 2028 and capping default tip prompts at 15% until then. Early results show steadier pay for workers and less pressure on customers. The nation is watching. Today, the digital tip prompt is less a tool of gratitude than a lever for shifting costs, engineered by employers and payment platforms, sanctioned by law. The minimum wage for tipped workers remains frozen at $2.13. This isn't generosity, it's a business model. The question is, who keeps paying for it?